Good morning. So let me ask you, and I don't think you need microphones, why are you here? Let me hear from the audience. Why have you come? I don't think this crowd is shy. Why have you come?
Working as an arbitrator in Bangladesh.
Okay. You're working as an arbitrator, and what do you hope to get from today?
Networking and know the
Okay, networking, learn more about what's happening here in the UK. What else?
See where the ICC is heading.
To learn where the ICC is heading. All right. What else?
Celebrate this huge milestone together.
Definitely to celebrate. Any other reasons people have come?
Probably from Paris to meet colleagues and friends.
To meet people, yes, indeed. So let me tell you why I am here. I am here for this amazing celebration of the court centenary. So thank you to ICC UK, to the Arbitration Committee, Anya, Guy, Ian, Chris Southworth, and of course to Matt and Ernst & Young for hosting us. I am also here for the centenary bike ride on Saturday, and thrilled that there are 50 of you joining us in Essex. So if you are interested in cycling and have not yet signed up, let me know. And a huge shout out to Owen, Lawrence, and Carl Wall for organizing this epic day. And let's hope actually I can keep up with everybody. But I am actually here for one very important reason, and Lord Neuberger actually expressed it so beautifully, and that is to promote access to justice. And we heard an explanation of what rule of law means, so let me just offer a little bit further discussion about what we actually mean when we talk about access to justice. We mean that everyone has actually an avenue of recourse if you've been wronged, and you have the opportunity to make that wrong into a right. I think it's really important to pause and actually think about what we mean when we're using these phrases, access to justice and rule of law, because we know that access to justice actually increases the prospect of peace. And we know that access to justice increases prosperity. So when we talk about arbitration, we are actually talking about providing access to justice, providing avenues of recourse that might not otherwise be available. And that is ICC's core mission, to promote access to justice and the rule of law. And to understand this mission, let me just take a step back because we are celebrating the centenary. So let me take a step back even before the founding of the ICC court to the founding of the ICC itself. And that was in the wake of World War I. A pioneering group of entrepreneurs who called themselves the Merchants of Peace wanted to promote peace and prosperity through cross-border trade. Their initial motto was world peace through world trade. In 1919, 4,000 business leaders from Great Britain, France, Belgium, Italy, and the United States met for a multi-day international trade conference in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Now, it might be a bit difficult to do you need to change the screen? Okay. Do you want me to open the?
Thank you. Sorry. Apologies.
It really doesn't make a difference. Okay, because people would not know.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. That's okay. Now, it might be difficult to imagine, but 100 years ago, Atlantic City was known for its resorts and its boardwalks, and it was booming. How many of you have been there? Okay, 100 years ago, it was booming, and even my grandparents had their honeymoon in Atlantic City. It was described, that conference in Atlantic City was described as the most important trade meeting in history. And it was a corollary to the peace conference in Versailles. At that meeting, conference delegates launched the process that led to the adoption of the ICC's Constitution and Foundation, with the first meeting of ICC taking place in the Sorbonne in Paris. Now, the resolution of disputes certainly was not the primary purpose of ICC, but the founders understood that if they were going to promote cross-border trade, there needed to be a mechanism by which parties could resolve cross-border disputes. And that is why in 1922, the executive board of ICC approved a plan for an international court for hearing commercial disputes. And on the 19th of January in 1923, the ICC court was inaugurated. Now, this year on the 19th of January, when we launched the centenary celebration, Alex Vesas and Jiva Filipic recorded their remarks from the very same room in the Tribunal de Commerce de la Seine, where the first meeting of the ICC court took place 100 years ago. And I recorded my remarks from the United Nations General Assembly building in New York. And I was there because of the pioneering role that the ICC played, that many of you may not know, that the ICC played in the adoption of the New York Convention. Most significantly, ICC actually prepared a draft of what then became the treaty. And of course, that treaty has now been signed by over 170 countries and is really the cornerstone to the acceptance and reason for utilizing ICC arbitration and utilizing arbitration more generally. But in this centenary year, we are not just going to rest on our laurels and talk about what we've accomplished or worked on in the past 100 years. We're talking about the future. And at the launch of the centenary, we issued, as Lord Neuberger mentioned, a declaration with 10 key pledges setting out our commitment on how we will shape dispute prevention and dispute resolution into the future. What are the priorities of the ICC court for the next centenary? So I won't tell you about all 10 pledges. I really urge you to download the declaration and take a few minutes to read. It's worth it. So I will just talk about a few. Now, in Pledge 2, really linked to what Lord Neuberger was speaking about, we pledge to hold fast to our founding belief that an independent and neutral dispute prevention and resolution process, free from influence and political dynamics, is key to enabling business and investment and the legitimacy of that process. In Pledge 5, we have pledged to improve transparency in the dispute prevention and resolution process, also linked to one of the key elements of rule of law that Lord Neuberger spoke about, enabling the democratization of information, consistency, and a greater understanding and trust in the process, while respecting legitimate expectations of confidentiality. In Pledge 7, we have pledged to amplify the benefit of the digitized economy and leverage technology to deliver efficient and pioneering dispute prevention and resolution services. And much of that work is underway right now at ICC with the work, the initial launch of ICC Case Connect and the efforts involved in VNext to be launched in 2024. I've also written and spoken a bit about the role of AI in arbitral decision making, separate and apart from the role of AI for parties in developing their cases. And I think as we have a session at the end of the day on the future of arbitration, stay tuned for more discussions on that. In Pledge 8, we have pledged to build on the groundbreaking work that we have already done on diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of dispute prevention and resolution, including all stakeholders in the process. And lastly, let me just mention our pledge to increase the reach of arbitration and ADR by forging what I really hope and believe we have is a global community through local engagement and forging long-lasting connections. So we cannot accomplish this alone. The future of dispute prevention and resolution is you. We need to hear your ideas. We need for you to be engaged in shaping this future. So together we can all promote access to justice. So I really do hope you are here to network. You are here to learn, but I hope you are here today to engage. I hope this is the start of a conversation and that you will be an essential part of the ICC community. So let me close this segment with this. I hope that we stay true to these principles to enable access to justice and the rule of law. And I believe we can fulfill the bold dream we have memorialized at the end of our declaration, that future generations will reflect on our contemporary achievements with the same reverence that we have for our predecessors. Thank you very much. So can I call to the stage Lord Bilimoria to join me for a fireside chat. I get to switch hats. Terrific. Thank you so much. This fireside chat is part of a series where I have been interviewing business leaders from around the world to better understand the trends impacting global business. And before I start, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the origin of the phrase fireside chat. You might be thinking a fireside chat is when those who are chatting are sitting by a fire. But as an American here now in the UK, the phrase fireside chat actually has its origin with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He was using the latest technology at the time, which was the radio. And while Americans from all across the country sat by the fire at their homes during the Depression and during World War II, he quelled rumors and explained his policies directly to the people. His radio addresses were described as a revolutionary experiment with a nascent media platform. So this fireside chat is really a perfect opportunity and setting for us to talk about entrepreneurship, leadership, the need for creativity in this rapidly changing environment. So Lord Bilimoria, thank you so much for joining me. As many of you will know, Lord Bilimoria is the founder of Cobra Beer. I hope many of you have enjoyed it while eating Indian food or otherwise, and he has sat in the House of Lords since 2006. So thank you very much. Lord Bilimoria, you came to the UK in the 1980s to study law at Cambridge. We understand you didn't like the taste of British lager then, and that was the reason you decided to develop a different kind of beer. So can you tell us a little bit more about this origin story, how as a university student studying law, you created such a successful brand?
Thank you, Will. Firstly, it's a great pleasure to be with all of you, and even more so as I'm back at my alma mater, EY. I qualified as a chartered accountant with them in the 1980s, and it's always great to come back. A year into my training, I realized I didn't want to be an accountant for the rest of my life. But I also realized what a fabulous profession and qualification it was. And I benefited all my life from the training that I received in a firm like this, a big global international professional firm. If you've had the privilege of working and training there, it lasts you a lifetime. So I'm always grateful for that. So I left the day I qualified. And then my law studies, I actually genuinely loved studying law, and I greatly value my law degree at Cambridge, which I cherish to this day. But I was thinking of becoming a barrister, and then I came up with the idea for this beer. It was not a eureka moment. I did not jump out of a bath naked and run down the streets of Cambridge. It was an idea that evolved from the time I came here as a 19-year-old student from India. And my father was a senior Indian Army officer. In fact, I'm going from this to meet with General Petraeus, the former Central Army commander of the American Army, and my father was the Central Army commander of the Indian Army, 350,000 troops. To put that into context, the British Army is now 72,000, which I don't approve of. I think it should be much more. And so I was allowed to drink beer from a relatively young age. And I've always loved beer. And when I came here, I was very disappointed with the beers that I was given in terms of lager beers. I found them very fizzy and harsh and bland and bloating and just difficult to drink. And when I went to Indian restaurants, I couldn't cook when I came here. I would try and drink the cold, refreshing beer that I was meant to have with spicy food. Cold, yes. Refreshing, no. And a bloating beer with spicy food was quite uncomfortable. And I was introduced very quickly to English ale. I believe a lot of you from all around the world. How many of you have tried an ale, an India Pale Ale or a British ale? Can I just see a show of hands? Yeah, I mean, I love this stuff. I absolutely took an instant liking. But I happily drank ale in a pub. I could not drink ale with food because the ale is too bitter, too heavy. And I knew ale drinkers hated fizzy lagers as well, and ale drinkers love curry. So what's going on here? Restaurant owner could sell more beer and more food, and that's how the idea evolved to produce a beer that had the refreshment of a lager and the smoothness of an ale combined. It would be really easy to drink and would accompany all food, and in particular Indian food. So that was my simple big idea. And it is a really simple idea. Why didn't somebody think of that before? I mean, beer's been around for millennia. And I think 100 years from now, people will come up with simple big ideas like Cobra beer. And people will say 100 years from now, why didn't somebody think of that before? And to this day, our slogan is brewed smooth for all food.
Yes, but many people complain about something and at night over a beer talk about, how a big idea, but then don't do anything about it. You actually had the drive to transform your ideas into a product. So what do you think, was that spark that enabled you to make that leap from actually an idea to doing something?
Yes. And again, I often give talks at schools and universities, and I ask the students, how many of you want to set up your own business one day? And over half the hands go up. So how many of you will actually have the guts to do it? And it does take guts to do it, because in my case, qualified chartered accountant, Cambridge law degree, I should have become an investment banker. And many of my friends did. And, while they were driving around in their BMWs, I was driving in a battered old Citroën de Chevaux called Albert. It needed push starting every day. It cost £295. And I'm not exaggerating any of this. You could see the road if you look down through the holes in the floor of the car. And so it does take guts to make that sacrifice, to make that leap. And of course, everyone thinks you don't stand a chance. I mean, I was up against giants. Kingfisher, the biggest Indian beer to this day in India, was here for 8 years before we started. Carlsberg was in every single restaurant. My father, big general, I knew he couldn't give me any money, but I thought at least some moral support, some emotional support. Dad, look at this, my own business, my own beer brand. Isn't this great? What are you doing? All this education, and you're becoming an import-export wala. Get a proper job. Become a banker. Anyway, he was my biggest fan once we succeeded. So.
But you actually cut your teeth on importing polo sticks, is that right?
Yeah, well, when I was at Cambridge, I was lucky to play polo for the university, and we beat the other place, and I led the first ever Cambridge polo tour to India, which my father helped organize. And when I came back with some sample polo sticks, and I'd made the decision to start in business with a childhood friend from Hyderabad, India, but the big idea was too big. And we were not ready to start working on something like Cobra Beer. And so we decided to build up some experience, and I started selling polo sticks. And I've made a phone call to the saddler I used to play against in Colchester. I said, Bert, I've got some sticks to sell. Come and have lunch with me in London. And at the end of the lunch, he gave me half the money for the sticks. And that was my first finance to start in business. I put in the order to Calcutta, and I was in business. And I ended up selling them to Harrods and to Lily White's. It was actually a giant market, polo sticks, but it got me off the ground.
And how did you decide on the name Cobra Beer?
It's one of the biggest mistakes I've made. No, I mean, on a serious note, before I answer that question, how many of you like the name Cobra Beer? Can I just be honest with me? Most people like it, yeah? Well, here's an early lesson that I learned. And one of my favorite sayings is, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. So there's no shortcut to making the mistakes and hopefully learning from them. So when we approach the brewery, and a lot of luck comes into this. I've attended 3 business schools. I'm an alumnus of 3 business schools, and I've never done a case study on luck. And every entrepreneur you speak to will say there was some luck in my journey. And I have had a lot of luck, some bad luck, but also lots of good luck. And the best definition of luck that I've ever heard is when determination meets opportunity. And an Indian spiritual leader said, I like that definition, but I've got a better one. He said, luck is all about timing. So you may have an idea, but the market is not ready for your idea, or the market's ready, but you're not ready. And in my case, my timing was perfect. Although I started Cobra in a recession, interest rates then were 15%. We're complaining about 5.25% now. Just imagine borrowing money at 15% when you couldn't borrow it at all. But Indian restaurants were getting more popular. People were getting interested in beers from around the world. And so it was in the right timing. And then my introduction to the biggest brewery in India happened to be the biggest independent brewery in India. They happened to have the best brewmaster in India. And then wait, the luck just continues. And they said, look, you can have Pal's beer, the beer you've known from the Indian Army messes through your father. I said, I'm sorry, but Pal's is the name of a dog food. So, okay. I'm a little insulted by that, but I said, that's a reality. Okay, because you've been introduced to your business partner's uncle, who's your mentor, and family friends, we will give you our best-selling brand. So the best-selling brand, which this day is a big selling beer in India, was called Knockout. And the label of Knockout had one boxer having floored another boxer. 8% alcohol. So I said, look, for a start, trading standards will never allow the name Knockout in the UK. And secondly, we don't want an 8% beer. Okay, you know, you have no experience in this industry, the two of you. You have no money. Kingfisher is the only Indian beer that succeeded. You're going to fail. Why don't you choose your own brand name and come here and sit with our brewmaster and develop this extra smooth beer, which we don't make, from scratch? Now think about it. If I had one of their brand names, I wouldn't be here talking to you. My most valuable asset is the Cobra Beer brand. So Arjun, my partner, Arjun Reddy and I, we went through hundreds of names, and we chose Panther, as in leopard. And we had it designed over here with a British marketing agency, and I can picture the label talking to you now. It was the eye of a black panther. It's very cool. I took it to India. The brewery said, these are our printers. I met the printers, handed in the artwork. Quite frankly, I forgot about the name and I forgot about the label. I was focused on getting that liquid right. And by the way, in those days, you could carry liquid in your hand luggage. I carefully selected the biggest bag I could take on board with 30 bottles of beer. And I sat in the laboratory with the brewmaster and tasted every one of these 30, saying, I like this about this beer, I don't like this, trying to convey this taste that I had, that I wanted to create, and which led to this complex recipe that we have now. So anyway, fast forward, months later, the beer's ready, maturing in the tanks, about to be shipped in 2 weeks. And Arjun calls me from London. He's holding the fort here. Karan, we got a problem. I'm trying to pre-sell the beer before it's shit. I said, well done. He said, nobody wants to buy it. I said, why? They don't like the name Panther. What do you mean they don't like the name Panther? What's wrong with Panther? I said, I don't know. They don't like it. Who cares what they think? Okay, who cares what they think? This conversation went on for a while. And I said, okay. There was a second choice name. I can't remember it. Go and look up the list. There was a second choice name which we rejected. He said, I've already done that. It was Cobra. I said, yes, Cobra. I said, why don't you go and ask these same people if they'll buy the beer if it's called Cobra? I'll go to the printers in the morning to see if they printed the Panther labels or not. Next morning on the way to the brewery, rushed to the printers, and the only time in my life I was hoping something was not done. Normally you're rushing to get things done. Have you printed those Panther labels? No, we're waiting for the brewery to tell us. Don't print them. Within 24 hours, Arjun called me back, and he said they love the name Cobra. And my brother Nadir had his own advertising agency in Hyderabad, the big city in the center of where I was born. I said, Nadir, I need your help. I flew over, his whole team down tools, and we created the Cobra beer label from scratch and shipped the beer to the UK, and it's the best decision I made. It's the lesson I learned as an entrepreneur: come up with the ideas, but never go forward without checking with your customer and your consumer first. And I've applied that many decisions I've had to make on this journey. And we can talk about that later, where there's one lecture that I give called Adapt or Die. And many of us in our careers, and I mean, I speak to the Defense Forces regularly. I was speaking to the Royal College of Defense Studies. I said, in your world, in the services, those decisions are a decision between life and death. In our case, that decision could be surviving in business or not surviving. Anyway, and Cobra has worked out to be a great name, and it's cool, it's short, it's sharp, it's punchy, it takes you back to India without doing it away like Maharaja or Taj Mahal or something like that. And the good thing about it is it feels as if it's been around for a long time. I met in the early days retired British Army officers who'd lived in India before India's independence, before the war. I remember Cobra, delicious beer. It didn't exist. Yeah. And we were about to celebrate our 25th anniversary. And people said, what? We thought you were 125 years old. We didn't celebrate our 25th anniversary.
I just want to go back to your comments about luck, because we do in the arbitration world too often hear from different arbitration practitioners about how they got their first case or how they got involved, and people will say, oh, I was in the right place at the right time. But I think luck, if that's really the theme, can also be a little disheartening, because then the question is, well, what do you do? And the way I like to describe it for myself is that you have to position yourself to be lucky.
Yeah.
There is an element of luck to it, but you have to make sure that you are the person who somebody wants to think of for that opportunity, or that you have to be the person to be mentored or to be given that chance.
Yeah, it's spot on. I mean, I gave a talk on a TED talk. If you're bored once, go look it up. It's titled something like Luck, Serendipity, and Sliding Doors. And the ultimate sliding door moment for me in my life was one of my Cambridge friends was having a party in Kennington in South London, and so I come to the drinks party, and another friend said, are you going to Bertie's party? I said, I don't know, I'm not sure, I'm not. He said, if you go, I'll go. I said, if you go, you. So we both said, we'll go for a short while. I went to that party and met my wife. And if I hadn't gone to that party, my whole life would have been different. And that one, going to that party, to your point, changed my life.
And for me, my major transformation in my career in international arbitration was the opportunity to go to Prague on 5 days' notice, originally for a month, and to stay for 3 years. And the law firm had gotten hired by the country of the Czech Republic. So I was willing to go in that short period of time, but also kind of the person who, as a senior associate or mid-level associate, had been thought of as a person who could go do that, because I was willing to do what it took for so many years in different cases. And so I got that opportunity because of the work I had been doing. So I really think that's an important element. Let's link also to the discussion on creativity. In rapidly changing technology, There's definitely a recognition that creativity is something that is not just limited to the arts. My sister, who is an artist who also has an MBA, was a visiting artist at a business school, which I really thought the dean of that business school was very forward thinking and kind of bringing that conversation to business students. In a context of AI, people have a recognition that if they don't have, they need to know more than the law, for sure, and have these other skills. So can you talk a little bit about how creativity is an element of
Sure.
entrepreneurship?
Yeah. First, I mean, I want to ask this question to all of you. There's no right or wrong answer. How many of you think you're creative? If you think you're creative, put your hands up. If you think you're not creative, down. There's no right or wrong, okay? Okay, thank you. I mean, normally when I ask this question around the world, it's about half-half, literally half-half. And when I was a child, if you visited my mother, my 87-year-old mother lives in North India, in her home in the sitting room, she's collected fine china and porcelain from around the world. And in this cabinet, there is a small pottery angel, and it is the ugliest angel you've seen in your life, made by me as a boy. And I was useless at art. I just couldn't draw. I was hopeless. So I was labeled as not creative. They forced me to learn the piano. I mean, my music teacher used to whack me with a ruler on my hand. I passed grade 1. Please give up, spare us. You're tone deaf. So not creative. So I went through all my education thinking I was not creative, being told I was not creative. And when I started as an entrepreneur, I realized the most important skill of being an entrepreneur is the ability to be creative. And I'm really very, very creative. And it had been suppressed throughout my childhood. So I'm a great proponent of encouraging children from a young age to have that confidence to be creative and to unleash that creative spirit that every one of you who didn't put your hands up have in you. Now, whether you become a lawyer, whether you join the civil service, or whether you do whatever, being creative and innovative is such a powerful ability, and we all have it. It's just got to be unleashed. I mean, I'd go so far as to say the GDP of the world would increase multifold if people were more creative and had that confidence.
I think it's thinking and realizing what you actually do is creative. I just came from New York, where I have lived for many years, and was trying to think about the spirit of New York, which, you know, gets described as there's nothing that can't be overcome. You know, there's nothing that's impossible. It's always trying to find a solution to a problem. And to me, that is the core of creativity, finding solutions.
Well, some people describe, you're absolutely right, entrepreneurship. I mean, what is entrepreneurship? And one definition of entrepreneurship is entrepreneurs will spot a problem, in my case, fizzy lagers, hating them, and ale not going with food, and fizzy lagers not going with food. I spotted a problem, but also you then spot the solution. And you want to act quickly. So it's that problem, solution, action that is what entrepreneurship is all about. And at the London Business School, which is one of the business schools I'm an alumnus of, they asked me, they interviewed me, and they said, when is the earliest time in your life that you realized you had the ability to be an entrepreneur? And I thought about it really carefully. And actually, it was when I was 8 years old, and my father was commanding his battalion of Gurkhas as a lieutenant colonel in Trivandrum in Kerala in South India. And they were having serious problems in Kerala with these militant communists who were getting very violent, basically killing people, taking people hostage, and said, we'll send the Gurkhas in there to sort it out. And they did. So I was sent to the local school, which was a Jesuit school, like Pope Francis, a Jesuit school, called Loyola School, which is till this day the #1 school in Kerala. And the headmaster and all of them in their robes. And they were so strict that one day my teacher reported me to the headmaster, and I was caned for bringing comic books into school. So then suddenly there was a diktat saying, English medium school, everyone in this school will now as a second language learn Malayalam, which is the language of Kerala state. And I said, what? I don't want to learn this Malayalam. So I went to this Malayalam class and I completely switched off. I said, this is useless. As an 8-year-old, why do I want to learn this language which is of no use to me for the rest of my life. My father's going to get posted out of here in a couple of years. No one speaks it anywhere in the world apart from Kerala. I'm wasting my time. So I complained to my parents, you've just been caned. You'll get caned again. Go and learn Malayalam. So I went back into the classroom. Again, I said, this is ridiculous. I complained again. They said, now we're going to report you to the headmaster. Go on. So what do you do with problem? Then you come up with a solution. So I went back to my parents. I said, why can't I learn Hindi? Hindi is the national language of India. I'm going to have to learn Hindi later on. They don't have a Hindi teacher. Go back and learn Malayalam. My father went and spoke to the headmaster. They got a Hindi teacher. And within 3 weeks, there were 26 of us in that class learning Hindi, other army officers, expats from different parts of India who wanted to learn Hindi. So that's the first time I realized problem, solution, action.
And this concept of a problem and a solution is not just for entrepreneurs, it's lawyers too. You know, when clients come to lawyers, they're not asking us, tell us what clause in this particular statute says X. What they come to the lawyers with is a problem, and they need a solution. And it's for us to be creative about how we think about what to do.
I think legal training is some of the best training in the world to be creative and to be innovative, because you're taught right from the early days to think widely. I remember the Dalai Lama, one of the lectures that I attended that he gave, he said, when you're confronted with a problem, think widely. And if you're confronted with an A does this to B and C and advise A, advise B, advise C, you've got to look at everything from statute to cases to obiter to journals and then you look at this vast array of information and narrow it down and apply it practically to come up with some advice and a solution. So it is legal. It is all about problem, solution, action.
And I like to also advise teams when we are thinking about this is what would you love to see happen? Don't think now about budget constraints. Don't think now about personnel constraints or other constraints. What would be the ideal additional resource or the ideal solution? And then if there's a hurdle, let's figure out how to overcome that.
Absolutely.
How do you learn then creativity? Is it something, do you need to unleash it, or are these skills people can learn?
Definitely skills people can learn. I think with anything, any profession, some people have a propensity to be slightly better at it, but anyone can learn to be an entrepreneur and learn creativity and innovation. And one way is to be exposed to it, is to you know, my favorite sessions at business school is when alumni and entrepreneurs would come and tell their stories and inspire you, and that encourages you. So we all have the ability to do it.
So we heard a little bit this morning about the role of diversity in the rule of law, but what role does diversity have from your perspective in creativity?
Yes, well, I come from the smallest minority community in the world. I'm a Zoroastrian Parsi. Who's heard of a Zoroastrian Parsi? A few of you. Okay, more than usual, by the way. The ones who didn't put your hands up, have you heard of Freddie Mercury of Queen? A Zoroastrian Parsi. Have you heard of the Tatars, who own Jaguar Land Rover Tata Steel? Parsis. Anyone into classical music? Zubin Mehta, the conductor? I could go on. It's a tiny community, just under 60,000 in India, the rest around the world, including 5,000 here. And I'm about to embark on some research at Cambridge about what drives the leadership effectiveness of a small minority community. And I'll be comparing it with other minority communities to come up with the reason why we're so successful. And when you have diversity, I believe it's not just to tick that box. Nowadays, you're encouraged to have diversity, tick the box. It works. I mean, Deloitte, I shouldn't be swearing over here, but Deloitte has conducted some very detailed surveys that show that more diverse companies are more innovative. And when I started Cobra Beer, first were just two of us, and we built up a very diverse team. It was like a mini United Nations of people from all over the world with different mindsets, different backgrounds, different cultures. And when you put that diversity together, it creates a buzz. And you literally are more innovative if you have a diverse environment. And I think this country has come a long way. And when I came here in the 80s, I was told by my family and friends in India if you decide to work in the UK after you finish your studies, you will never get to the top because you will never be allowed to get to the top as a foreigner. And I'm sorry to say they were absolutely right then. But today they'd be absolutely wrong. I mean, if you heard Rishi Sunak's speech yesterday, many people say the most powerful part of his speech was about his story of a grandson of immigrants originally from India, who's now Prime Minister of this country. The cabinet in this country is full of people from different backgrounds, from Africa, from India, it's amazing. You can reach the very top now. So I think it's really powerful to have diversity, not for the sake of it, it works. And I founded something called Change the Race Ratio when I was president of the CBI. And it's an initiative that's Trevor Phillips, the famous journalist, is now taking over from me as the chair of it, and I'm going to be president.
And I see that certainly at the ICC Secretariat, I think there's 35 different nationalities just in the team. My intern over lunch yesterday was just so excited because of how diverse the interns were, and she was saying she was really thriving in that environment. So
well, I'm very proud to be on the board of the ICC, chaired by my friend Paul Drescher here from Ireland, so we've got diversity there as well.
So let's go back to some of the points you were discussing right at the very beginning, which was building your brand. Obviously, building a strong brand is crucial in today's market. So what, in your opinion, makes a strong brand?
People compartmentalize brands as something that applies mainly to consumer products and fast-moving consumer goods, like Coca-Cola, or Cobra Beer, or Carlsberg. But actually, a brand is so important whether you're in a B2B or a B2C business. It is all powerful. But, what makes an extraordinary brand? And when we formed our joint venture with Molson Coors, who are one of the biggest brewers in the world, I had this joint venture 14 years now. And in the formation of joint venture, we used to have these secret meetings in hotels near Heathrow with a meeting room with no sign outside. And one of these secret meetings, they said, I'll never forget this, they said, 3 reasons we want to do this joint venture with you. We're a big multi-billion-dollar New York Stock Exchange listed company. You're a small entrepreneurial company. We wanted to have this merger for 3 reasons. We want you as the founder entrepreneur to stay on as chair of the joint venture, which I do to this day. We want your team to come and join and integrate, which they did, most of them. And third, you have an extraordinary brand. I said, thank you for the compliment. They said, no. We have a way of categorizing what is an extraordinary brand. And these are the 6 criteria. And you can apply this, by the way, to anything. You can apply to EY, to a law firm, ICC. So what makes an extraordinary brand? 1, an extraordinary brand is based on an undeniable brand truth. In our case, I would say Cobra Beer, it's that extra smooth, less gassy taste that makes it go well with food is our brand truth. Secondly, an extraordinary brand never compromises on its principles. And you will see this, the really strong brands have very strong ethics. Third, an extraordinary brand has an instantly recognizable and iconic look. Now, those of you from the UK, I would ask you to close your eyes and picture a bottle of Cobra Beer. And I bet you will be able to picture a bottle of Cobra Beer with the yellow and the green and the embossed bottle. Fourth, an extraordinary brand delivers a relevant and consistent experience. And this is really important, where there's no point being a one-day wonder or a one-month wonder. Can you, in my case, hundreds of millions of pints and bottles and cans of Cobra Beer every single day, year, and you as a consumer are demanding. You want it to taste exactly the same as the one before. I mean, it's so unfair. Producing beer is really difficult. It's natural ingredients that change with the seasons, change every year, and you still want it to taste the same. It's a really difficult process. Wine is completely different. You can pay £100 for a bottle of wine, and if it tastes different, it's fine. It's a different vintage. I tell you, wine is so easy to make. Beer is really tough. It's not fair, but anyway, that doesn't matter. So that relevant and consistent experience is really important. And the fifth one is, in my view, the most important, is an extraordinary brand produces loyal brand champions. This is when you've cracked it. This is when people love your brand. People seek out your brand. If two people go into an Indian restaurant and they order 2 Cobras, or sorry, we don't sell Cobra, they walk out and go to another restaurant. That's the loving of the brand, the brand champion. And finally, an extraordinary brand produces extraordinary profits. There's no point doing this unless it works. So that's what makes an extraordinary brand.
You've had to make some tough decisions while building that brand. Can you speak about some of those?
How much time do we have? No, I mean, lots of really difficult decisions there. When building the brand, I'll give you a couple of examples. One, my business partner, I couldn't have done it on my own, and we were together for the first 5 years, literally living and working in the same premises, and I trusted him completely. To this day, he's one of my best friends. Afterwards, he said, "This plane is never going to take off. I hate the weather in England. I'm leaving." I bought him out on his terms, and the year after he left, our sales doubled. Not because he left, the year after he left. And so then I started building up a team, and it's all about people, by the way. I chair the Manufacturing Commission in Parliament, and I'm a proud manufacturer, but any business, including manufacturing, it's all about people. Built up a great team, put some money into marketing, and the sales of Cobra beer doubled in 1 year. My problems of importing Cobra beer from Bangalore in India quadrupled, and I just couldn't cope. So the distributors were complaining and saying, "Look, our restaurants are complaining, consumers are complaining, there's inconsistent product, there's quality problems, containers getting stuck." And so we said, "Well, what do we do?" He said, "Your problem." I said, "We'll start brewing Cobra in the UK under license, like Kingfisher does, like Carlsberg does." "You're finished. You built this up as an authentically imported Indian beer. If you do that, no one will buy your product." Goes back to my story about the name Cobra. I said, "Now what do I do? I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. I'm having these problems. The distributor says it's your problem. I want to brew over here. The only person that can give me this answer is the ultimate consumer." So we did surveys, thousands of surveys at trade shows, consumer shows, and we asked consumers to rank in order of importance the following factors about Cobra beer: brewed to an authentic Indian recipe, the fact that it's a premium beer, the fact that it's imported from India, and the fact that it's got this less gassy, extra smooth taste. And we jumbled it up, so there's no bias. Thousands of consumers. You know what the results were? The most important thing to the consumer about Cobra beer: the less gassy, extra smooth taste. And to our shock and surprise, the least important thing to them was imported from India. I'm brewing here, and I moved my production across. All my problems are over. World-class quality, packaging available. I could even do draft beer, which I couldn't do from Bangalore. And that's because I trusted my consumer, and those same distributors said, "We'll never buy from you again," bought even more from me. So that's that lesson about adapt or die. If I hadn't made that decision and carried on importing from India, I wouldn't be here talking to you. And you need to trust your consumers. So that's one. I mean, I could give you many examples of that, but that is one example of it.
Well, you told us why Molson Coors wanted to partner with you, but in the kind of a further, perhaps difficult decision, what drove you then to want to restructure and join forces with them?
Well, I was forced to do it. I've nearly lost my business 3 times, and this was the third time, and it happened just after Lehman's went bust. If you remember, in 2008, we had the financial crisis, and I'd already nearly lost my business twice before then. And then I was forced to sell my company by one of my biggest funder at the time, an American hedge fund. And we ended up trying to sell the business, and to my luck, Molson Coors said, "We don't want to buy you, we want to do a joint venture," which was great. But by then we had huge losses, a lot of debt, we had to restructure the company. And Molson Coors said, "Well, let's do that together." And we came into an arrangement called a CVA. And we had 90% of our creditors agreed to it. And then at the last minute, with all the lawyers working on it, these are top law firms working on it, bankers, the hedge fund, all ready to go, about to go into court to submit the CVA. And one of our creditors, which was a competing brewer, put in a winding up order. And the whole CVA was off. And on that day, I nearly lost everything I'd worked for. Literally, Molson Coors said the deal's off and walked away. And slept over it the next day, and I said, come on, we've done all this work. There is one way to do it. There is only one way to survive, for this brand and this company to survive, and that is to go through a pre-pack administration, which had a horrible reputation. I said, I'm in my position, I was already in the House of Lords then. I said, I will only do it if it's above board. You will only do it if it's above board, which means we will have to compete to buy the brand. And PwC, Rothschilds worked on it. Anyone could have bid for it, including the people who put in the winding up order. And in the end, it was a sealed bid a week later, and I could have lost the business, and our bid was the highest, and we won. And the business survived, and here we are today, stronger than ever. But the further part of it is that I also looked after my secured creditors, my employees, my unsecured creditors. I'm paying them off as we speak to this day. I'm nearly there. I'm a few months away from it, from having paid off, settled everyone. And it's never been done. And my shareholders I've kept with me, including my employee share options. People who don't work for the company still have their shares, and they're going to get something soon. So and the three things that I've realized that get you through a crisis. One is having a strong brand. Second is having a good team and a loyal team. And if you've got family, my wife stood by me. I met her a year after I started Cobra. She's been by my side throughout all this. I wouldn't be here without her support. And finally, integrity. And I think that it is that integrity, it is that, as we say here in the UK, playing with a straight bat, which is very difficult when you're up against the wall, you're going to lose everything, and everyone else around you is not playing with a straight bat. Can you play with a straight bat? And it is that word integrity that is so cliched. And the best definition of integrity that I've ever heard is from the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time, Rowan Williams, who's now with me in the House of Lords as a crossbench peer. He came to visit the Zoroastrian Center. And as a patron, I made the welcoming speech. And then he said, Lord Bilimoria in his speech has used the word integrity 3 times. And the Zoroastrian Parsi community is renowned for its integrity. He said the best definition of integrity, this I'm quoting him, comes from the Latin and Greek words integer, integrum, that mean wholeness. You cannot practice integrity if you're fragmented in front of the light. You can only practice integrity if you are whole and complete as an individual. So brand, team and family support, and integrity, and I think you can get through any crisis.
So let's shift a bit to talk a little bit further on leadership, but also on strategic thinking. In my role over the last few years as the president of the ICC court, I feel like I have to wear many hats. So hopefully not fragmented. Hopefully all the hats are as one, but really I have to make sure the work of the ICC court is at the highest quality. I have to be the chief ambassador of the organization. But the third bucket is really important, which is thinking about the strategy of the institution. Where do we want to be in the next 5 years, 10 years, or 100 years? So how do you, on a personal level, carve out time for that strategic thinking when there's all the immediate work you have to do as well?
Yes. You I think, always got to be thinking ahead all the time. Now, in business terms, I split it into mission and vision. So I think you've always got to have a mission at any one time. You know, with Cobra Beer, the mission from the beginning and even now is to brew the finest ever Indian beer and make it a global beer brand. Now, I'm sorry to boast, but we are the finest ever Indian beer by miles. 145 gold medals. But global beer brand, I'm not. We brew here in Belgium and in Holland. I'm now bringing up a non-alcoholic beer from Serbia, latest technology, best non-alcoholic beer in the world. But export to 40 countries, but we're not a global beer brand. But we're on that journey, I can measure it. And then you combine that with our vision, which is our attitude, which is to aspire and achieve against all odds with integrity. So that aspiring and achieving that will is really key as well. So you put the two together, always looking ahead. Now, it's also the difference between winning the battle and winning the war. Now, how many of you, by the way, think Brexit was an unmitigated, stupid disaster, self-inflicted harm. Can I just see a show of hands? Yeah? Yeah, I asked this question around the world. It's 99%. International audience, domestic, 99% of the hands go up. Now, that battle to save this country from Brexit was lost. But the war's not over. And I think the time will come when we will settle into a relationship with the European Union, which could end up rejoining, but will certainly end up being in a much better place than we are right now. So it's also that constant, the difference between strategy and tactics. You know, tactics is day-to-day. Strategy is always thinking long-term. And I think you've always got to think long-term.
I mean, do you, on your calendar, actually block out time where you say no meetings for this hour? I have to actually think, or is it more organic?
It is more opportunistic in that if I'm on a day flight, that's a great time when you're undisturbed on a flight, and I do some thinking then. So yeah, there are times when I will find and I'll make sure I do it. And I note it down. I mean, on my phone, I've got my 90-point plan right now. There.
And I think the point you make about long-term versus short-term is also very interesting. You hear Jeff Bezos, other CEOs of multinational companies always saying that if anyone in the C-suite is talking about what's going to happen in the next quarter, they're not doing their job, because the results of the next quarter are already baked. They've been decided based on decisions and actions taken in the previous quarters or the previous years. We see that with ICC too. The statistics of this year are not decided based on the work I'm doing as the president of the court, but we know that the number of case filings are 2, 5, and even 10 years of work from when contracts were entered into, in which the parties agreed to ICC arbitration, then a dispute brewed, and then they decided to file. And we have a very long timeline in that context. So I often think of my role like a director of an arboretum. When I'm planting these trees, you will maybe see a few inches or feet of growth, but it's really a very long-term process.
Yes, absolutely. That's why the democratic process, on the one hand, is fantastic, but on the other hand, is so short-term. And there's Rishi Sunak saying, I want to take the long-term view. He's going to have an election next year. And it's 4 or 5 cycles in which people think. So you try and think long-term, but you're always thinking, what is going to get me re-elected in a very short time? And in America, it's every 2 years. I mean, how can you have long-term thinking? But yet, I think what's good about democracy is it's dynamic. What I hate are things like referendum. A referendum is the worst form of democracy in the world, because it's asking people to make a decision at a point in time, and then you look back and say they didn't know what they were voting for, they didn't have full information, they were lied to, but they can't change their mind because it's a one-off decision forever. So referendum not democratic at all. Real democracy, however, with the flaws of short-term thinking, at least is dynamic, and if people let you down, you can change your mind and vote in somebody else.
Well, one of the people I know you went to school with, there must have been something very good at that Hyderabad school, was Ajay Banga, who is now the president of the World Bank, and before that was the chair of the International Chamber of Commerce, chair of the executive board. And he, famously, when he became CEO of MasterCard, said to the shareholders, this is going to require some major investment. So you are not going to see the results in this next quarter. And then the question was, were the shareholders willing to invest in that? Yeah. How do you also balance that, not from a political standpoint, but from a business standpoint, having the shareholders be willing to have a longer term view?
Absolutely. And he was so successful in what he did at MasterCard in his tenure there. It was phenomenal, not only for the brand, but he created this enormous charity, a multi-billion-dollar charity that didn't exist before. He's a hugely talented individual who's always looking long-term. And you've got to be able to, this is where, will people trust you? And this whole concept of trust, if you can get the shareholders to trust you. And one of my favorite professors at HBS gave a virtual lecture during the pandemic on trust. And it's a 1-hour lecture, and I'll summarize it in 1 minute. And she said, trust is like a triangle. To get trust from people, the First is, are you authentic? Is it the real you that people are dealing with? Second point of the triangle is logic. Do you have the professional capability to deliver what you're promising to deliver? And the third point of the triangle is empathy. Are you in it for yourself or are you in it for them? So if you have that authenticity, logic, empathy, you can get trust from people. And he has that in spades.
So let me close with the two questions I like to ask everyone with whom I have this fireside chat. The first is, well, what are the pressing issues that keep you up at night?
I sleep really well.
So the corollary of that question is, what then is exciting and gets you up in the morning? It's really the two sides of the coin.
Absolutely. What I feel, I feel so fortunate and lucky to have the opportunities that this country has given me, coming here as an immigrant, as an international student, to allow me to set up a business from scratch to this now household name. I mean, you go to any corner of the UK, people know Cobra Beer and love Cobra Beer. We sell 7,000 restaurants, tens of thousands of off licenses and cash and carries, and it's available and people love it. So I'm really proud of that, to be able to be in the House of Lords for 17 years. You know, as the third youngest peer when I joined, I'm still one of the younger peers now. So to have been president of the Confederation of British Industry, and Paul was my predecessor, and to be president, as luck would have it, and somebody said bad luck, during the worst crisis since the Second World War, with the pandemic and the sad war in Ukraine starting under my watch. These are all lucky, fortunate opportunities. We chancellor the University of Birmingham, one of the biggest universities in the country and top 100 in the world. These are all great opportunities. So I cherish all of it. I'm going to be in Birmingham this evening at our annual meeting, chairing our annual meeting with our stakeholders in Birmingham. Of course, the mayor, Andy Street, will be there, and he hasn't resigned because of HS2. So I look at it positively in that sense.
We have a few minutes for one or two questions. Do we have any from the audience? Yes, Ian. Just stand up and speak loudly.
Thanks. To a degree, we are all involved in sales and marketing. What are your top tips for sales and marketing?
Okay. So you're absolutely right, where people think, oh, sales and marketing is to do with consumer products and products being sold. But actually, we all have to sell. And it's one of the most important skills in life. And when I stood for elections at the Cambridge Union, you have to sell yourself to get elected as well. I would, if I answer another way, I have my 10 Ps that apply to any business. Okay? First P is product. You've got to have a great product. In my case, it's could be a super premium product. Secondly, it's got to be at the right price. We're premium product, so it's expensive, but you can have a value for money product, value for money price. Third is it's got to be available, so place, and in our case, distribution of restaurants and supermarkets I've spoken about. Fourth is you've got to promote it, and the promotion, depending on which business you're in our case, with an FMCG product, it's got to be the full suite of point of sale, public relations, advertising, social media, the full suite of marketing. Now, if you've studied marketing, those are your 4 Ps of marketing. So that's my quick answer. I've got 6 extra Ps. The next one is people. It's all about people, as I've spoken about earlier. The next P is finance, spelled PH. You can't do, you can't do anything without the money. So you need the money to do it. The next P is passion. There's no point doing it or selling something or working and doing whatever work you do unless you love it. Follow your passion, not your pension. The next P is partnership. Do you have that mindset where you partner with everybody? So it's not just your customer and your supplier, they're your partners. Your advertising agency, your partner, your lawyers, your partners, your accountants, your partners, your shareholders, your partners, your employees, your partners. That partnership approach, not just your business partner. The next P is principles. It's better to fail doing the right thing than to succeed doing the wrong thing. And the last P is you've got to make profits out of it.
All right, one more. Yes.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Paisley. I just had a quick question. You talked about creativity and then the need for action. What I noticed, both in my business life and my life as an arbitrator, is that that often that's where people break down, right? It's not that they don't have the great idea. It's not that they're not creative. It's that when the step comes to actually put that into action and to do the necessary grit work that is required to do it, like you described, that's where they don't do it, because it becomes hard, it becomes amorphous, and I wondered whether you had advice, particularly for young people, because I think in what we do for a living, also that's where people break down. Theoretically it's all fine, but then when they actually have to do it, put themselves out there and do the hard row, that's where they fall apart.
So is that the last question?
It is.
Okay, I was going to make some, if you don't mind, a couple of remarks at the end. But
Please do answer, and then you can make.
Should I do that at the same time, or?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so the two aspects to how I will answer that. One is you have two mindsets of leadership. One is playing not to lose, which is what you're talking about. And I'm sorry to say this, in a big organization or in the civil service, typically an idea is put and the first reaction is, why should we not do this? What can go wrong? The next mindset, which is more the entrepreneurial mindset, is playing to win, where you see an opportunity in everything, where you're positive about it, you want to go for it and make it happen quickly. Completely different ways of thinking about it. If you have that play to win attitude, you tend to be more creative and innovative and willing to take those risks. And it goes back to my father when I was about to start my training at what is now EY, and he was commanding a division as a general on the Chinese border. And I went on a holiday before I was about to start work here. And I said, Dad, my first job, can you give me some advice? Come and see me in my office. I had to get an appointment from his ADC. And I sat in his office, which I'm not exaggerating, was half the size of this room. I felt very small in his big office. And he gave me the most phenomenal advice that I remember to this day. And the best advice he gave me was this. He said, son, you're starting at the bottom. You'll be given lots of tasks. The first thing when you're given a task is do it. The next thing is do that little bit extra that you were not asked to do. And that's the best advice I've been given in my life. You're saying, take initiative, be innovative, be creative, and always go the extra mile. That's the best advice I can give. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Claudia and Lord Bilimoria, for that excellent fireside chat. Claudia, I'm amazed that today's the first time I learned the meaning of fireside chat. Lord Bilimoria, listening to you, I was reminded, of a question I got yesterday from one of the speakers. Is the aim for tomorrow amusement of the audience or erudition? And you have, without doubt, achieved both of those objectives. You've also given me 3 inspiring takeaways. I'm moderating the panel later on the future of arbitration. So I'm going to remember simple, big ideas. So let's be brave enough to have those big ideas. Problem, solution, action. So let's be brave enough to implement our big ideas. And one that I think Claudia reminds us of regularly, trust your consumer. So let's listen to our users. But thank you very much again to both of you. And now it's time for our coffee break. If we could all be back here by 11:30, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.